The morning sun, a gentle caress on my 72-year-old skin, was usually my favorite part of the day. It promised routine, quiet reflection, and the simple pleasure of a well-ordered world. My name is Eleanor Vance, and for decades, this quiet corner of suburban America had been my sanctuary. A retired schoolteacher, a widow for nearly 10 years, I'd found a rhythm in my golden years: morning walks, tending to my rose garden, a good book by the fireplace in the evenings, and of course, the steady, comforting presence of my children and grandchildren, even if they lived busy lives of their own. This particular Tuesday, the air hummed with the promise of late spring, thick with the scent of blooming jasmine and the cheerful chatter of cardinals. My usual route took me past Mrs. Henderson's meticulously trimmed hedges, the boisterous playground of the elementary school I once taught at, and finally, around the bend to my daughter Sarah's house. Sarah, my eldest, the accomplished marketing executive, was supposedly thousands of miles away, closing a major deal in sunny California. That's what she'd told me anyway, with a faint, almost imperceptible tremor in her usually confident voice. I was humming a forgotten tune, enjoying the warmth seeping into my bones, when the song died in my throat. My feet, accustomed to their steady pace, faltered. A cold knot formed in the pit of my stomach, a sensation utterly alien to the peace of this morning. There, in Sarah's driveway, beneath the old oak that scattered shadows like secrets across the paved stones, was her car. The bright red Suburban, an unapologetic splash of color in our sedate neighborhood, gleamed defiantly in the sunlight. It was unmistakable. Sarah's car. My mind reeled. Sarah was in California. She'd explicitly said so. Called just last night, her voice a little too bright, a little too quick to change the subject when I asked about her flight. A sudden, sharp memory of her earlier calls surfaced, hushed tones, hurried goodbyes, an underlying tension I dismissed as work stress. But this was different. This was a lie. A strange, unsettling urge to confront her, to understand, propelled me forward. My legs felt heavy, as if resisting the truth my eyes had already perceived. I walked up the flagstone path, the familiar crunch beneath my sensible walking shoes sounding abnormally loud in the sudden, eerie quiet of my mind. The porch swing swayed gently in the breeze, empty. A forgotten Amazon package sat by the front door, a mundane detail that felt grotesquely out of place in this surreal moment. As I reached the front door, my hand hesitated. I noticed the faintest crack in the thick, leaded glass panel beside the ornate knocker. Not broken, just a hairline fracture, almost invisible unless you were looking. And then I heard it. At first, it was just a low murmur, a muffled thrum through the heavy oak door. My heart, which had already begun to pound an erratic rhythm against my ribs, lurched. I leaned closer, straining to hear, my ear pressed against the cool wood. Two voices. Muffled, yes, but unmistakably present. One was Sarah's. It wasn't her usual clear, confident tone. It was a whisper, raw and laced with something that sounded terrifyingly like desperation. A choked sob. And then, a man's voice. Low, guttural, utterly unfamiliar. It carried an undercurrent of something cold and menacing. Not my son-in-law, Daniel. This was different. Darker. An electric jolt of fear shot through me. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to make sense of the fragmented sounds. The man's voice, a gravelly rumble. And then, clear enough to send a chill straight to my bones, an unmistakable phrase from Sarah, thick with terror. We have to get rid of it before anyone finds out. The words hung in the air, a poisonous vapor. My breath caught. My tranquil, perfectly ordered world shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. I couldn't believe what I had heard. The morning sun, now a cruel spotlight, seemed to illuminate not peace, but a monstrous, unfolding secret. My legs, once so eager for their morning stroll, now felt like lead. Each step away from Sarah's house was a heavy, reluctant retreat, as if an invisible tether pulled me back to the horrifying secret lurking within. The jasmine scent, once delightful, now smelled cloying, almost suffocating. The cheerful chirping of the cardinals seemed a mocking soundtrack to my spiraling thoughts. Get rid of it, before anyone finds out, The words echoed in my mind, a relentless, chilling refrain. I stumbled through my own front door, the familiar scent of lemon polish and old books doing little to calm the frantic flutter in my chest. I sank onto the floral armchair in the living room, my gaze fixed on nothing in particular, my hands trembling. What did it mean? What was it? And who is that man? Not Daniel. Definitely not Daniel. Sarah. My Sarah. Always so poised, so put together. The one who meticulously planned her life, who never made a misstep. Was it possible she was involved in something illicit? Something so terrible that it required getting rid of? A cold sweat prickled my skin despite the mild morning air. I thought back. The subtle changes in her recently, the way her eyes darted when I asked about her work trips, the almost imperceptible clenching of her jaw, the overeagerness to end our calls. I had dismissed it as the pressure of her demanding career, a common enough affliction in our modern world. Now, every small detail felt like a flashing red light. My hand, still shaking, reached for the cordless phone. I had to call her. Had to know. Dialing her number felt like defusing a bomb. The phone rang once, twice, then clicked to voicemail. You've reached Sarah Vance. I'm currently unavailable. Please leave a message. Her voice, recorded, was calm, professional, utterly devoid of the frantic edge I had heard just moments ago. My heart sank. Unavailable. Or avoiding. I paced my living room, a prisoner in my own home, the silence amplifying my dread. This wasn't like Sarah to have her phone off, especially not during a supposed workday. An hour stretched into an eternity. My mind raced, constructing outlandish scenarios, each more terrifying than the last. Had she been coerced? Was she in trouble? Or had she done something terrible? Finally, I concocted a plan, thin and transparent as gauze, but a plan nonetheless. I needed to see her face, to look into her eyes. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing pulse. A forgotten book. Yes, that would do. I'd forgotten a book at her house last week. A plausible enough excuse. Grabbing my spare key, a relic from when I used to babysit the grandkids, and clutching a worn copy of Pride and Prejudice to my chest like a shield, I walked back down the street. Each step now felt fraught with a new kind of tension, a desperate hope mixed with a sickening fear. I knocked. A light, almost tentative rap, completely unlike my usual brisk knock. Silence. I waited, holding my breath. Just as I was about to use the key, the door opened a crack. Sarah. She looked different. Her usually impeccable blonde hair was a little disheveled, as if she'd run her hands through it countless times. Her face was pale, almost translucent, and there were faint, bruised-looking smudges under her eyes. Her lips were pressed into a thin, unnatural line, and her eyes, usually so bright and intelligent, held a haunted, wary look. Yet, she managed a weak, forced smile. Mom, what a surprise. I thought you were on your walk. Her voice was a little too high, a little too strained. Oh, darling. I was. But I realized I left my book here last week. That beautiful copy of Austen. Did you happen to see it? I held up my copy of the same book, a desperate prop. Her eyes flickered to the book, then back to my face. A beat too long. Oh, right. The Austen. Come in. She opened the door wider, and a faint, unfamiliar scent wafted out. It wasn't her usual lavender and lemon. It was earthier, sharper. Like freshly turned soil, mingled with something metallic, something vaguely chemical. My senses, sharpened by anxiety, picked up every nuance. As I stepped inside, my eyes immediately scanned the pristine living room, searching for any telltale signs. Everything looked normal. Too normal. Almost staged. Sarah moved with a nervous energy, her hands fluttering to her hair, then smoothing her already neat shirt. So, California was a short trip? I tried to keep my voice light, innocent. She laughed, a brittle sound that didn't reach her eyes. Oh, you know how these last-minute corporate things are. Everything got moved up. Had to jet back for an urgent client meeting. She avoided my gaze, looking somewhere over my shoulder. My eyes snagged on her left hand. A faint, angry scratch, just above her wedding band. It looked fresh, raw, as if she'd been clawing at something or something had clawed at her. "Your hand, dear. What happened?" I pointed, trying to sound concerned, not accusatory. She snatched her hand back, tucking it behind her. "Oh, this? Just a silly kitchen accident. You know me, always clumsy with a vegetable peeler." Another forced laugh. The tension in the air was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. Her words were an elaborate tapestry of lies, each thread pulled taut. I could feel it, almost taste it. We talked for a few more stilted minutes about my roses, about her children, who were thankfully at school, about mundane neighborhood gossip. But every word was a performance, every glance a deflection. As I finally made my excuses to leave, clutching my forgotten book, I paused at the door. "You know, Sarah," I said, my voice softer now, tinged with a genuine plea, "you can always talk to me. About anything." Her eyes met mine then for a brief, unguarded moment. And in their depths I saw not just fear, but a profound, desperate sadness. A flicker of something broken. Then the mask descended again, quickly, firmly. "I know, Mom. I'm fine. Just stressed." She offered another wan smile. "I'll call you later." I walked away, the morning sun no longer a comfort, but a harsh revealer of ugly truths. The house behind me, once a beacon of my daughter's success, now felt like a mausoleum of secrets, its polished surface hiding deep, irreparable cracks. My Sarah was not fine. And I, Eleanor Vance, was no longer just a grandmother taking her morning walk. I was a mother whose world had just been turned upside down, and who knew, with chilling certainty, that this was only the beginning. The facade Sarah presented was so meticulously crafted, so utterly un-Sarah, that it only served to deepen the chasm of my unease. I replayed our conversation in my mind as I walked home, each forced smile, each darting glance, each dismissive wave of her hand a fresh piece of evidence in the growing case against her manufactured calm. The scratch on her hand, the faint, earthy metallic scent in her house, the sheer absurdity of her urgent client meeting explanation, it all coalesced into an undeniable, terrifying truth. My daughter was in trouble, and she was lying to me. Back in my own quiet home, the familiar comfort of my living room felt like a thin veil stretched over a gaping abyss. I sank back into the armchair, the Austen forgotten on the side table. My mind, usually so orderly and precise, was now a maelstrom of conflicting emotions: fear for Sarah, anger at her deception, and a strange, cold resolve. I couldn't ignore this. Not now. I started to piece together fragments of Sarah's past, looking for clues, for any pattern of behavior that might explain this terrifying turn. Sarah had always been a driven child, ambitious, eager to please. She hated imperfection, loathed failure. I remembered a time, when she was perhaps 8, and she'd meticulously repainted a school project after getting a B, sobbing that it wasn't good enough. Or the time she'd found a missing homework assignment in her desk after insisting she'd turned it in, her eyes wide and innocent, though I'd always suspected she'd done it that morning. Small things, childhood fibs, easily dismissed. But now, in the harsh light of recent events, they took on a darker hue. They spoke of a deep-seated need to maintain an image, to control her narrative. My gaze drifted to the old mahogany bookshelf, laden with photo albums spanning decades. Perhaps, I thought, there was something there. A forgotten memory, a face I might recognize, a thread to pull. With a sigh that felt far too heavy for my frame, I rose and pulled down a dusty, leather-bound album from the upper shelf. It was the one from Sarah's college years, a chaotic collage of awkward hairstyles, questionable fashion choices, and the boundless optimism of youth. I flipped through the pages, a bittersweet nostalgia washing over me. There was Sarah at her graduation, beaming, arm in arm with Daniel, her then boyfriend, now husband. Sarah on spring break, laughing with friends. Sarah in her dorm room, surrounded by books. And then I stopped. Half hidden behind a slightly creased photo of Sarah and her sorority sisters, I found a smaller, almost square snapshot, tucked away as if meant to be overlooked. It was Sarah, younger, perhaps 21 or 22, but with a guarded, almost anxious expression I rarely saw. She was standing next to a young man. His face, it tugged at a memory, a faint, persistent echo. Not someone I knew well, but someone whose features felt disturbingly familiar. He had a mop of dark, unruly hair, intense eyes, and a slightly defiant set to his jaw. He wasn't handsome in the conventional sense, but he possessed a certain raw energy. He was leaning in close to Sarah, his arm around her shoulder, a possessive, almost predatory glint in his eyes. Sarah, for her part, looked uncomfortable, her smile tight. Who was he? Why did his face seem so familiar, yet so elusive? He was definitely not Daniel. And he certainly wasn't one of her usual, wholesome college friends. I strained my memory, searching for any context, any name. Nothing concrete. Just that nagging feeling, like a word on the tip of my tongue. A cold dread began to seep into my bones. This wasn't just about Sarah's current predicament. This felt deeper, reaching further back, entwined with threads I didn't recognize. The man in the photograph, could he be the one whose voice I'd heard? The low, menacing rumble? The thought sent a shiver through me. The casual, almost affectionate pose in the photo stood in stark contrast to the terror in Sarah's voice earlier. What had happened between then and now? What dark path had they walked together? This old photograph, tucked away like a secret, felt like a vital clue, a missing piece to a puzzle I hadn't even realized I was trying to solve. It hinted at a past Sarah had carefully hidden, a past that was now, quite literally, knocking on her door. And I, her mother, was standing at the threshold, on the verge of uncovering something that could shatter not just Sarah's life, but the very foundation of our family. The sense of foreboding intensified, a cold premonition of danger settling deep within my heart. This was no longer just about a worried mother, it was about an unfolding mystery, one whose roots lay buried in a past I barely knew. Sleep, that blessed oblivion, refused to grace me that night. My mind, usually a quiet pool of gentle thoughts, was a churning tempest. Every creak of the old house, every rustle of leaves outside my window, sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I kept replaying Sarah's strained voice, the unknown man's guttural rumble, the image of that dark-haired young man from the old photograph. They fused into a grotesque kaleidoscope of fear and unanswered questions. Around 2 a.m, a faint glint of light, moving erratically across my bedroom ceiling, caught my attention. It was too late for a car's headlights. I crept to the window, my bare feet cold on the polished wood floor. The street was dark, the few streetlights casting long, distorted shadows. But then I saw it. A shadowy figure, tall and agile, moving stealthily through Sarah's backyard. My breath hitched. The figure moved with purpose, not like a drunkard or a casual passerby. It paused, glancing around, then slipped almost effortlessly through the gate to the driveway. My eyes, straining in the dim light, followed its progress. It moved towards Sarah's garage, a standalone structure behind her house, usually kept locked and unused. A brief flicker of light, like a tiny beam from a flashlight, and then the garage door, which I knew was always secured, seemed to slide open just enough for the figure to squeeze through. It vanished inside. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through the haze of my anxiety. This wasn't some casual midnight prowler. This was deliberate. Planned. I wanted to call the police, to scream, to do something, anything, but a paralyzing terror rooted me to the spot. What if I was wrong? What if it was nothing? What if I exposed Sarah to something worse? The thought of her desperate whisper, "Before anyone finds out," held me captive. I watched, breathless, for what felt like an eternity. After perhaps 15 minutes, the garage door slid silently shut again. The shadow re-emerged, moving swiftly, then melted back into the darkness of the neighboring yards. I couldn't make out a face, couldn't even discern if it was the same man I'd seen in the photo, but the sense of unease solidified into a concrete dread. Morning arrived, unwelcome and gray. I hadn't slept a wink. My first instinct was to call Sarah, but I hesitated. What would I say? I saw a shadow lurking around your garage? She would dismiss it, or worse, lie again. I needed a better pretext. I needed to get inside that garage. After a cup of lukewarm tea that did little to soothe my nerves, I waited until I knew Sarah would be at work, or at least pretending to be. Then, armed with a fresh batch of my famous lemon poppy seed muffins, my universal excuse for unexpected visits, I walked back to her house. I knocked firmly this time, waiting a moment before using my spare key. The house was silent. Empty. Just as I expected. I placed the muffins on the kitchen counter, trying to act as if this were a normal neighborly drop-off, a casual intrusion. Then, with a resolve born of a mother's fear, I made my way to the garage door leading from the kitchen. It was locked, of course. Sarah was meticulous. But a quick search of the utility drawer yielded a small set of spare keys, neatly labeled. Garage 1 red. My hands trembled as I inserted it into the lock. The click echoed loudly in the quiet house. The garage was a typical suburban garage, shelves of tools, gardening supplies, stored boxes, Daniel's dusty golf clubs. Nothing immediately jumped out. The air, however, was heavy with that same earthy metallic scent I'd noticed yesterday, only stronger here. And a faint, cloying sweetness, like something trying to mask another odor. My eyes scanned every corner, every shadow. Nothing overtly suspicious. Just a sense of recent activity. A smudge of dark dirt on the pristine concrete floor near a stack of old tires. A few drops of something sticky, almost dried, near a workbench. My gaze fell upon the large, wheeled trash bin in the corner, usually kept outside. It was now inside, near the back wall, its lids slightly ajar. Against my better judgment, against every instinct that screamed, "Don't touch," I knew I had to look. Holding my breath, I lifted the lid. Inside, beneath several layers of innocuous trash, empty coffee cups, junk mail, was a crumpled mass of newspaper. It looked recently torn. As I carefully separated a piece, my blood ran cold. It was an article. A local paper, dated just a few days ago. The headline, stark and bold, read, "Local man missing, police suspect foul play." And beneath the headline, a photograph. A headshot. My breath hitched, a strangled gasp caught in my throat. It was him. The young man from Sarah's old college photo. The one with the unruly dark hair and intense eyes. Michael. His features, older now, etched with a harder edge, were unmistakable. My hands began to shake violently, the newspaper rattling. The words of the article swam before my eyes, but I managed to grasp key phrases. Michael Donovan, last seen. Apartment ransacked, no forced entry, suspicious circumstances. My mind raced back to Sarah's desperate whisper, "We have to get rid of it, before anyone finds out." A wave of nausea washed over me. Sarah. Michael Donovan. The garage. The strange scent. The shadowy figure. It wasn't a coincidence. It couldn't be. My daughter, my sweet, successful Sarah, was somehow entangled in something far more sinister than I could have ever imagined. The image of Michael Donovan's face, staring blankly from the crumpled newsprint, was a stark, horrifying confirmation of my deepest fears. The quiet, idyllic life I cherished was crumbling, revealing a horrifying darkness beneath. The newspaper article slipped from my trembling fingers, fluttering to the concrete floor like a dying bird. Michael Donovan. Missing. Foul play suspected. The words resonated with the echo of Sarah's frantic whisper, merging into a terrifying symphony of dread. My own daughter. How could she be involved in something so unspeakable? The carefully constructed reality of my life, built on the foundations of respectability and quiet domesticity, imploded in that moment. I knelt, scrambling to retrieve the crumpled newsprint, my heart thudding a painful rhythm against my ribs. This wasn't just a secret, a family misunderstanding. This was a crime. And Sarah, whether perpetrator or victim, was at its dark heart. A cold, hard resolve began to crystallize within me, hardening the jelly-like fear. I would not stand by. My daughter needed me, whether she knew it or not, whether she wanted my help or would resent it. The old Eleanor, the one who meticulously tended her roses and enjoyed her quiet routine, was gone. In her place was a mother driven by a primal need to protect, to uncover, to understand. I carefully folded the newspaper, tucking it deep into the pocket of my cardigan. The muffins, now a forgotten offering on Sarah's counter, seemed to mock my futile attempt at normalcy. I locked the garage door behind me, pocketing the spare key, a small act of rebellion and assertion. This was now my secret, too. Back home, I brewed a strong pot of coffee, the bitter taste a welcome counterpoint to the sweetness of despair. My mind, though still reeling, began to work with a new, sharp clarity. How does one investigate a missing person case when the police are already involved and your own daughter is potentially implicated? I wasn't a detective. I was a retired English teacher. But I had a lifetime of observation, a keen intellect, and something perhaps more valuable, a network of old friends and colleagues, people who trusted me. Mary Higgins, my dear friend and former colleague from the elementary school. Mary, who, even in retirement, spent her days volunteering at the local public library, her mind a veritable steel trap for information and a surprisingly adept hand with a computer. If anyone could help me discreetly, it was Mary. I called her, forcing my voice into a semblance of its usual cheerful tone. Mary, darling, how are you? I was wondering if you might have a moment for a coffee this afternoon. I've been meaning to ask you about that new historical fiction novel. The pretense felt hollow, but necessary. Mary, bless her heart, readily agreed. That afternoon, over lukewarm coffee and a plate of stale cookies at a quiet corner cafe, I carefully broached the subject. I showed her the crumpled newspaper article, pretending a casual interest. Terrible, isn't it, Mary? This poor young man. Michael Donovan. The name seemed familiar. I wonder if he ever went to our old school. Mary, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, peered at the photo through her bifocals. Donovan, The name rings a bell, Eleanor, but not from elementary. Perhaps high school? Or college? Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, narrowed slightly. Wait a minute. Donovan. Michael Donovan. Wasn't there some sort of kerfuffle back when Sarah was at university? A small scandal involving some kind of club or society. I vaguely remember hearing something from one of the other teachers, whose son was in the same year. My breath caught in my throat. A scandal? What kind of scandal, Mary? I tried to keep my voice even, but a tremor betrayed me. Mary tapped her chin thoughtfully. Oh, it was years ago. 25 years? Something about misuse of funds or a forged signature on some university paperwork for a student organization. Nothing major, no one went to jail, but it was hushed up pretty quickly. Very embarrassing for the university, I recall. I think a few students were suspended or had their academic records flagged. Michael Donovan was one of the names mentioned. Anne. I think Sarah might have been involved in that same organization, though I never heard her name directly tied to the scandal itself, just that she was part of the group. The pieces, though still disparate, began to connect with a chilling click. Sarah. Michael Donovan. A financial scandal from their college days. Misuse of funds, forged signature. The words echoed the faint, almost forgotten stories I'd heard about my late husband's early career in banking, hushed rumors of a small-town financial mishap that had quietly disappeared with time. I pushed that thought aside for a moment, the connection too painful, too overwhelming, to process just yet. Mary, could you do a little digging for me at the library? See if there's anything online, any old newspaper archives from that time? I'm just morbidly curious, you understand. Such a tragedy, this poor young man disappearing, and it makes me wonder about his past. I offered her my most convincing innocent smile. Mary, ever the kind soul, nodded. Of course, Eleanor. I'll see what I can find. It's good to keep the mind sharp, isn't it? As I left the cafe, the world no longer seemed quite so gray. It was sharp, vibrant, and terrifyingly real. My conversation with Mary had confirmed my worst suspicions. Sarah and Michael Donovan had a shared, troubled past. A scandal that had been swept under the rug was now resurfacing, dragged back into the light by a missing persons report and a desperate whisper. My quiet life had become a battlefield, and I, Eleanor Vance, was about to step onto it, armed with nothing but a mother's resolve and a growing, horrifying suspicion that the deepest secrets often lie buried closest to home. The revelation from Mary, innocent as it seemed in her recounting, struck me with the force of a physical blow. A college scandal. Misuse of funds. Michael Donovan. The pieces, though still scattered, began to form a dark, unsettling mosaic. And then, the faint, disturbing echo of my own husband's past, the hushed whispers about a minor financial misunderstanding from his early days at the local bank, returned with chilling clarity. It was a connection I had subconsciously suppressed for decades, a memory I'd painted over with the warm brushstrokes of our loving marriage. Now, the paint was peeling, revealing something ugly beneath. Back in my study, a room usually reserved for reading and quiet contemplation, I felt a desperate need to confront these ghosts. For years, James's old study had remained largely untouched since his passing, a shrine to a life well lived, a memory too precious to disturb. His meticulously organized desk, his leather-bound books, the scent of pipe tobacco that still clung faintly to the curtains, they were all part of the comforting fiction of my perfect husband. But comfort had given way to a gnawing suspicion. With trembling hands, I approached the old oak filing cabinet in the corner, a piece of furniture I'd always assumed held nothing more than old tax documents and insurance policies. I pulled open the bottom drawer, the one that had always stuck a little, the one James had always said was just for junk. I'd never had the heart to go through it thoroughly, but now a morbid curiosity, fueled by fear, propelled me forward. Dust motes danced in the slivers of sunlight piercing through the blinds as I began to sift through the contents. Old receipts, yellowed correspondence, forgotten greeting cards. Then, beneath a stack of his fishing magazines, I found it. A small, wooden box, intricately carved, that I'd never seen before. It wasn't locked, but it felt heavy, laden with unspoken truths. My fingers fumbled with the clasp. Inside, nestled among layers of tissue paper, were not jewels or heirlooms, but meticulously folded letters and faded newspaper clippings. My heart began to pound a frantic rhythm against my ribs. These weren't the kind of things one kept in a junk drawer. These were secrets. I carefully unfolded the first clipping. The date was over 40 years ago. The headline, though less sensational than the one about Michael Donovan, was chillingly familiar in its theme: Local families face ruin after bank investment scheme collapses. The article detailed how a trusted local investment firm, closely associated with the bank where James worked, had defrauded several small-town families, leaving them financially devastated. Names were listed, many familiar, some long-forgotten neighbors. My eyes scanned for a name, any name, that might connect. And there it was. Among those deeply affected was the Donovan family, whose life savings were entirely wiped out. Donovan. Michael Donovan's family. A cold wave of nausea washed over me. The connection was undeniable, horrifying. Michael's father. This was his family's ruin. Was this the root of his current actions? Was this what he was holding over Sarah? I read on, my vision blurring with a mixture of shock and dawning dread. The article mentioned a junior loan officer, a promising young talent, who had been cleared of any direct wrongdoing but had been present during key meetings and had signed off on some of the initial paperwork. No name was given, but the description was unmistakably James. My James. My upright, honest, community-minded husband. Next, I opened a series of letters. They were not love letters, nor casual notes. They were formal, almost legalistic, addressed to James from various lawyers, from the bank's internal ethics committee. They meticulously documented the investigation, reiterating his clearance, but also emphasizing the reputational damage and the unfortunate oversight on his part. But one letter, handwritten and undated, was different. It was from James himself, addressed to a dear Arthur, a close friend from his banking days. I unfolded it, my hands shaking so violently I almost dropped it. The handwriting, James's familiar, elegant script, seemed to leap from the page, betraying a desperation I'd never known in him. Arthur, I can't sleep. The weight of this is crushing me. They've cleared me, yes, but I know what I did. I knew. I saw the signs, the irregularities, but I looked the other way. Blinded by ambition, by the promise of a promotion. And now the Donovans, the Millers, so many others, ruined. I told myself I was just following orders, that it wasn't my direct responsibility, but that's a lie. A cowardly lie. I can never tell Eleanor. She believes in me. She believes in us. This secret will go to my grave. But God help me, Arthur, the guilt, it's a living hell. If only I could make it right. If only I could give them back what they lost. The letter dropped from my grasp. The air was sucked from my lungs. My perfect James. My steadfast, honorable husband. He had been complicit. Not an instigator, perhaps, but a silent accomplice, someone who had seen the wrong and chosen to ignore it for his own gain. The guilt that had haunted him, the secret he had carried to his grave, was now laid bare before me, 40 years too late. The shock was profound, a physical ache in my chest. All these years I had lived with a ghost, a carefully constructed image of a man I thought I knew. He had died with his secret, protecting me, perhaps. But in doing so, he had unknowingly laid the groundwork for the very chaos now engulfing our daughter. Michael Donovan, his family ruined, their suffering directly linked to the very scandal James had helped cover up. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying precision. Sarah wasn't just embroiled in a current crime, she was caught in the suffocating web of a legacy of deceit, a consequence of her father's buried sins. My grief for James, once a gentle sorrow, now turned into a bitter cocktail of betrayal and profound disappointment. The tears that streamed down my face were not for my husband, but for the woman I had been, the life I had believed was true. This wasn't just Sarah's secret anymore. This was our family's secret, woven into the very fabric of our past. And I, Eleanor Vance, the unsuspecting widow, was now faced with the devastating truth that the man I had loved and honored was not the man I thought he was. The weight of this revelation was staggering, leaving me breathless and adrift in a sea of newly discovered lies. The letters from James, coupled with the old newspaper clippings, lay scattered across his desk, each word a fresh wound. My head throbbed, a dull ache behind my eyes. The man I had loved, respected, built a life with, he had carried this burden, this complicity in silence. The realization was a bitter pill to swallow, changing the very landscape of my memories. It wasn't just Sarah who was entangled in a web of deceit, it was our entire family history. But grief and disillusionment had to wait. Sarah was still in danger, trapped in the current, and I now understood, with a sickening clarity, why. Michael Donovan wasn't just some random thug. He was the son of a family ruined by the very actions James had condoned. This wasn't simple blackmail. It was a decades-old vendetta, a terrible debt demanding payment. My next step, I decided, had to be Daniel. Sarah's husband. My son-in-law. Surely, he had to know something. He lived with her, shared her life. Or perhaps, I thought with a growing tremor of unease, he was part of the problem. His voice wasn't the one I'd heard, but his dismissiveness yesterday had grated on my nerves. I called him, feigning a casual desire to check in on the grandchildren. Daniel, ever polite, but always a little detached, obliged. Oh, they're fine, Eleanor. Busy with school. Sarah's just under a lot of pressure at work, you know. Big client pitch. She's been burning the midnight oil. Yes, I saw her yesterday, I ventured, trying to keep my voice light. She seemed strained. A bit pale. Is everything all right, Daniel? She mentioned a last-minute return from California. There was a slight pause on the other end, a beat too long. Oh, that. Yeah, a real mess, those corporate shakeups. She had to rush back. Nothing to worry about, Eleanor. Just Sarah being Sarah, always giving 110%. His tone was overly reassuring, almost dismissive. His words felt like pebbles thrown against a concrete wall. He wasn't just unconcerned, he was actively brushing me off. Or, worse, actively concealing. A cold suspicion began to coil in my stomach. Was he truly ignorant, or was he an accomplice in the charade? His placid indifference, his quick deflection, felt too practiced. He was either remarkably oblivious or remarkably good at lying. My instinct, honed by years of watching human behavior, screamed the latter. He finished the call with a breezy, "Don't you worry your head about a thing, Eleanor. We've got it handled." Handled? The word tasted like ash. They were clearly not handling it. They were drowning in it and dragging me down with them. I knew then that I couldn't rely on Daniel. I had to find more. I had to go back to Sarah's house, not just to snoop, but to actively search. This time, my pretext would be simpler: watering her prized hydrangeas, which I knew she worried about, especially with her supposed travel. The afternoon sun was high when I returned to Sarah's, the air thick with unspoken secrets. Using my spare key, I let myself in. The house felt colder, emptier than before, the silence oppressive. My heart pounded with a mixture of apprehension and grim determination. I knew I was violating her privacy, crossing a line I never thought I would. But the stakes were too high. My daughter's life, perhaps even her freedom, was on the line. I moved through the house with a quiet purpose, my eyes scanning, searching for anything out of place. The kitchen was tidy, the living room immaculate. I went to her study, a small, elegant room off the main hallway, where she often worked from home. Her desk, usually organized down to the last paperclip, had a stack of files slightly askew, a coffee mug left with a ring on the polished wood. Small details, but telling of a hurried departure, a troubled mind. My gaze fell upon a small, antique wooden box, tucked away on a shelf behind a row of law books. It wasn't a jewelry box. It looked more like an old document case, made of dark, polished wood, with an ornate, but simple, brass latch. It was locked. This was it. My instincts screamed. This was where the real secrets were kept. I tried a few old keys from my purse, remnants of forgotten lockboxes and childhood diaries. None fit. My fingers brushed against the small, decorative keyhole. I remembered an old trick from a novel I'd read, a long-forgotten skill from some teenage fantasy. I rummaged through my purse, pulling out a bobby pin, one of the few frivolous items I still carried. My hands, surprisingly steady now, began to work. It took a few attempts, a frustrating minute or two of fumbling, but then, with a soft, distinct click, the latch sprang open. My breath hitched. My heart hammered. I paused, taking a deep, fortifying breath, bracing myself for whatever truth lay within. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, were not jewels, but a collection of documents. Old, yellowed papers mixed with newer ones. There were copies of old college transcripts, but also formal-looking letters on heavy paper, stamped with official-looking seals. I picked up one, my eyes scanning the fine print. It was a promissory note, dated years ago, with a shockingly large sum, signed by Sarah. It wasn't just a loan. It had the feel of a settlement or a hush payment. Another paper was a threatening letter and signed, demanding payment by a certain date, mentioning revelations and ruined reputations. Michael Donovan's name wasn't explicitly mentioned, but the implied threat of exposure hung heavy. And then, nestled among the papers, was a small, sleek black flash drive. Modern, innocuous. But in this box of secrets, it felt like the most potent weapon of all. I pulled it out, its cold plastic casing a stark contrast to the old, brittle papers. This wasn't just about debt or old college pranks anymore. This was a deeper, darker game. My daughter, unwittingly or not, was a pawn. And I, her mother, had just found the key to her cage. The invasion of her privacy felt like a necessary crime, a desperate act to uncover the truth and save her. The flash drive, a small, unassuming rectangle of plastic and metal, felt impossibly heavy in my hand. It was cold to the touch, a stark modern object amidst the yellowed papers and the dusty scent of old secrets. My fingers traced its smooth surface, a sense of profound unease settling over me. What horrors, what betrayals, what undeniable truths lay hidden within its silent memory? I relocked Sarah's box, carefully replacing it on the shelf, leaving no discernible trace of my intrusion. My heart was still a frantic drum in my chest as I left her house, the air outside feeling thin and insufficient. The muffins remained untouched on the counter, a poignant symbol of the normalcy that had been shattered. I clutched the flash drive tightly, a dangerous, volatile secret now tucked into my own pocket, joining the crumpled newspaper clipping. My mind immediately turned to Mary. My dear, discreet Mary, with her sharp mind and her surprising computer skills. She was the only one I could trust, the only one who wouldn't immediately call the police or dismiss my fears as an old woman's fancy. I called her, my voice strained but firm. "Mary, darling, it's Eleanor. I need your help with something, rather urgent. Something I found. It's not about books this time. It's more personal." Mary, ever perceptive, heard the tremor in my voice. "Eleanor? Are you all right? You sound quite distressed." "Of course, dear. Come over whenever you're ready. The library is quiet this afternoon." Within the hour, I was sitting across from Mary in a secluded corner of the library, the hushed whispers of patrons a strange counterpoint to the storm raging within me. I pulled out the flash drive, placing it on the polished wooden table between us. Then, with a deep breath, I explained everything: the car in the driveway, Sarah's altered voice, the overheard phrase, the shadow in the garage, the newspaper article, James's letters, and finally, the contents of Sarah's locked box. Mary listened patiently, her kind face growing steadily graver, her eyes widening with shock as the full weight of my story unfolded. She didn't interrupt, didn't judge, simply absorbed every word, her hand occasionally patting mine in a gesture of silent support. When I finished, she picked up the flash drive, her brow furrowed. "Eleanor, this is far more serious than I could have imagined. Your husband. I'm so sorry, my dear." Her voice was soft, laced with genuine sympathy for my belated grief. "But you're right. We need to see what's on this." She led me to a back office, a tiny room filled with stacks of old microfiches and a surprisingly modern computer. With a practiced ease that belied her years, Mary inserted the flash drive. The screen flickered, displaying a folder icon. She clicked it open. What followed was a dizzying, sickening descent into Sarah's hidden life. The flash drive contained a mix of files, encrypted documents, audio recordings, and several short, grainy video clips. Mary, with surprising speed, managed to open the first few documents. They were a continuation of the promissory notes I'd seen, documenting a steadily increasing debt, now explicitly tied to Michael Donovan. Each note was signed by Sarah. It wasn't just a college scandal, it was an ongoing, escalating financial burden. Then came the audio recordings. The first one Mary played sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the library's air conditioning. It was Sarah's voice, pleading, desperate. "Michael, please, you can't do this. I told you I don't have it. My father, he never left me anything like that. You have to believe me." And then, the low, guttural male voice I had heard outside Sarah's door. Unmistakable. "I don't care what your old man did or didn't leave, Sarah. His dirty money went somewhere. And you're going to pay for his sins. Or everyone finds out. Not just about the college fund. About everything. About his connection to the Donovan collapse. And what you did to help him cover it up." My breath hitched. What she did to help him cover it up? I whispered, my voice barely audible. Mary paused the recording, her face etched with concern. "Eleanor, it sounds like he believes Sarah was actively involved in covering up your husband's involvement in the old scandal. Or at least, he's using that as leverage." We listened to more recordings. Each one painted a clearer, more terrifying picture. Michael Donovan wasn't just seeking revenge for his family's ruin, he was actively extorting Sarah. He believed she had access to hidden funds from the old scandal, money her father had supposedly stashed away. He threatened to expose James's complicity and, more disturbingly, implied that Sarah herself had played a part, perhaps unknowingly, in perpetuating the deception, protecting her father's secret even after his death. He mentioned specific dates, specific transactions from years ago, details that made my head spin. Then Mary opened the video clips. They were short, shaky, filmed in what looked like Sarah's living room. In one, Michael was yelling, his face contorted in anger, while Sarah cowered, tears streaming down her face. In another, a blurry image of documents being pushed across a table, money changing hands. And in the final, most horrifying clip, a figure in shadow was digging in Sarah's backyard, near the old oak tree. The same figure I'd seen in the dead of night. A cold dread spread through me. The digging, I murmured, the smell of earth in the garage. Mary's face paled. Eleanor, do you think they buried something? Or someone? The implication hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Michael Donovan was missing. Sarah was being blackmailed. Her father was involved in a past financial scandal directly linked to Donovan's family. And now, digging and a desperate plea to get rid of it. My mind raced, connecting the dots of decades of deception, from James's silent guilt to Sarah's present terror. She wasn't just a victim of blackmail. She was caught in a generational crossfire, paying the price for sins that weren't entirely her own, but that she was desperately trying to keep buried. The scale of the lie, the sheer depth of the family's hidden history, was staggering. My anger, once directed at Sarah for her deception, now shifted to a fierce, protective fury. My daughter was in too deep, drowning in a current that had started long before her time. And I, Eleanor Vance, was the only one who could pull her out. My world had expanded beyond my quiet garden. It was now a dark, treacherous landscape, and I was about to walk into its most dangerous corners. The revelation of Michael Donovan's fate, implied by the digging and Sarah's frantic words, hit me with a sickening force. Mary, bless her brave heart, had been visibly shaken, her usually composed demeanor replaced by a look of horrified concern. We had agreed to keep the flash drive and its contents secret for now, until we could formulate a plan, until I could understand the full scope of Sarah's involvement. But the knowledge burned within me, a toxic flame consuming my peace. The world outside the library, once a place of mundane normalcy, now seemed to shimmer with a sinister edge. Every car that lingered a moment too long at a stop sign, every pedestrian who seemed to glance my way, sent a jolt of ice through my veins. Paranoia, a feeling utterly foreign to my 72 years, began to creep into my consciousness. It started subtly. A car, a dark sedan with tinted windows, parked on my street for several hours, only to vanish when I went to investigate. Then, a few days later, a hang-up call on my landline, followed by another. When I called back, the number was disconnected. It could be random, I told myself, just an old woman's overactive imagination. But deep down, I knew better. The shadows I'd seen around Sarah's house were now extending their reach, touching my own, once impenetrable sanctuary. I tried to rationalize it away, but the unsettling incidents accumulated. A mailman I didn't recognize, even though I knew every delivery person on my route, seemed to linger near my mailbox, observing my house. The gentle rustling of leaves outside my bedroom window at night now sounded like furtive footsteps. My quiet suburban life was slowly, insidiously, being poisoned by a pervasive sense of being watched, judged, and, perhaps, targeted. The realization that the danger wasn't confined to Sarah, that it had now spilled over to me, was both terrifying and galvanizing. I was no longer an innocent bystander, a worried mother trying to help her child. I was a target. And suddenly, the gentle rhythms of my life felt utterly inadequate. I had to warn Sarah. Despite her pleas for me to stay out of it, despite her persistent lies, I couldn't let her face this alone. I called her, my voice urgent. Sarah, you need to be careful. I think someone is watching me. And if they're watching me, they're watching you. Her response was a mix of exasperation and terror, her voice tight with suppressed panic. Mom, please. Just don't get involved. You don't understand the full picture. You'll only make things worse. Just stay home, stay safe. I can handle this. The plea was hollow, devoid of any genuine confidence. It was the desperate cry of someone trying to hold back an avalanche with their bare hands. But, darling, they know about Michael Donovan, I insisted, dropping the bomb with a quiet force. I know about his family, about father's involvement in the bank scandal. I found James's letters. And I know about the flash drive. I know you're being blackmailed. A stunned silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken fear. Then a choked sob from Sarah. Mom, oh God, Mom, why did you? You shouldn't have. This is so much worse than you think. You don't understand the people involved. They are dangerous. Please, for your own safety, just forget everything you've heard. Leave it alone. Her voice was barely a whisper, ragged with fear, yet still trying to push me away. Her plea, though born of genuine terror, only strengthened my resolve. She wasn't pushing me away to protect herself, she was trying to protect me. And that, more than anything, convinced me I could not retreat. I heard the fear in her voice, but I also heard a desperate love. As I hung up, a strange calm settled over me. This wasn't a problem to be solved with polite inquiries or discreet digging. This was a battle, and I, Eleanor Vance, needed to be ready for it. My mind, sharp and analytical, began to sift through old memories, not of books or lessons, but of a different kind of knowledge. I remembered my youth briefly. The self-defense classes I'd taken in college, a fleeting fascination with martial arts that my conservative parents had dismissed as unladylike. I'd learned basic holds, how to use my body weight, how to identify weaknesses. Forgotten skills, buried under decades of domesticity, now resurfaced with an almost surprising clarity. I wasn't strong, not anymore, but I was agile, and I possessed a fierce will. I started small, checking the locks on my doors and windows, not just once, but twice, 3 times. I bought a new, stronger deadbolt for the back door. I practiced walking silently, observing my surroundings, using the periphery of my vision. I thought about the layout of my house, potential escape routes, places to hide. I even found an old, sturdy umbrella, heavy and with a sharp point, and started carrying it with me on my walks, not just for rain, but as a potential deterrent. The fear was still there, a constant hum beneath the surface, but it was now laced with a steely determination. I was no longer a victim waiting for the inevitable. I was a player in this dangerous game, ready to protect my daughter, to uncover the full truth, and to face whatever shadowy figures emerged from the depths of our family's past. The quiet, gentle Eleanor was gone, replaced by a vigilant, resolute woman, preparing for a confrontation she knew was coming. The fear, once a chilling vapor, had solidified into a constant, low thrum beneath my skin. Each day felt like navigating a minefield, every shadow a potential threat. Yet, amidst the rising tide of paranoia, a new, colder emotion took root, a deep, bitter anger. Anger at Michael Donovan for his vengeful campaign, anger at James for his buried secrets, and a burgeoning, festering anger at Sarah for her continued silence and self-imposed martyrdom. But most of all, a chilling suspicion was growing towards Daniel, my son-in-law. His dismissive tone, his insistent reassurances that everything was handled, now rang hollow, like the clang of a cheap bell. My initial thought had been that he was simply oblivious, perhaps too caught up in his own life to notice Sarah's torment. But the more I replayed that first overheard conversation outside Sarah's house, the clearer the second voice became in my memory. A low, commanding rumble. Not Michael's voice, which I had now heard on the flash drive, sharp and menacing. This was different. Deeper. More controlled. Daniel's voice. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, worse even than the discovery of James's betrayal. James had been long dead, his mistakes a historical wound. But Daniel was alive, living next door, a seemingly integral part of Sarah's life. If that voice had been his, if he was aware of Sarah's plight, then his actions were not ignorance, but a calculated form of complicity, perhaps even manipulation. I needed proof. Another visit to Sarah's house was out of the question. She was likely on high alert after my last call. But Daniel was predictable. His routine was as meticulously planned as Sarah's, a schedule I knew intimately from years of family dinners and holiday gatherings. He had a weekly poker night with his friends every Wednesday, leaving his office precisely at 6 p.m. and arriving home around midnight. Tonight was Wednesday. As dusk settled, painting the sky in hues of bruised purple and deep orange, I watched from my living room window. Exactly at 6 p.m., Daniel's black SUV pulled out of his driveway. My heart hammered with a mixture of apprehension and grim resolve. This was my chance. I didn't go to Sarah's house directly. Instead, I walked to the end of my street, ostensibly to retrieve my mail, and then, with practiced nonchalance, I strolled past Daniel's car in his driveway. I knew he often left his briefcase in the back seat after work, retrieving it in the morning. A small, almost imperceptible scratch on the passenger door, A detail I'd noticed when he'd once driven me to the airport confirmed it was his. My hand, surprisingly steady, reached for the back door handle. Unlocked. Daniel, for all his meticulousness, sometimes forgot the simplest things. I slipped into the silent SUV, the scent of leather and stale coffee filling my nostrils. I didn't turn on any lights, relying on the faint glow from a distant street lamp filtering through the tinted windows. His briefcase lay on the back seat, exactly as I expected. It was heavy, well made. My fingers fumbled with the clasp. It wasn't locked. Inside, neatly organized, were typical corporate documents, spreadsheets, reports, business cards. But tucked beneath a stack of financial projections, I found a small, discreet notebook. Its cover was plain black leather, no company logo. It felt personal. I opened it, my eyes straining in the dim light. It wasn't a diary, but a series of cryptic notes. Dates, amounts, initials. And then a name. Donovan. Followed by a specific date, and a number that looked suspiciously like a large sum of money. Below it, a chilling entry, S, protection, ongoing. My blood ran cold. S, protection. Sarah. He knew. Not only did he know, but he was actively tracking payments, referring to Sarah's protection. Protection from what? From Michael? Or from the truth? He wasn't just aware of Sarah's blackmail. He was involved. He was actively managing the situation, perhaps even facilitating it. A wave of bitter understanding washed over me. Daniel wasn't protecting Sarah out of love. He was protecting his own comfortable life, his family's pristine reputation, and, perhaps, his own hidden interests. He wasn't a partner. He was a silent co-conspirator, using Sarah as a shield, pushing her further into the abyss of Michael's demands to protect their shared secret, or a secret he was privy to. I also found a small, folded piece of paper tucked into the back cover of the notebook. It was a printout of an email. The sender was an anonymous address. The recipient was Daniel. The subject line, Re, your father-in-law's little secret. The body of the email was brief, chillingly direct. The game is still on. Michael is getting impatient. Tell Sarah she needs to find the rest. Or the whole town hears about James Vance and the Donovan collapse. And about what she helped him bury. The words twisted in my gut. What she helped him bury. Not just his financial complicity in the old scandal, but something else. Something active. Sarah's desperate whisper in the first chapter, the man's voice, now clearly Daniel's, discussing getting rid of it. The pieces of the puzzle weren't just fitting, they were snapping into place with brutal precision. Sarah was caught in a horrifying bind, blackmailed by Michael Donovan, whose family James had ruined, and manipulated by her own husband, Daniel, who was using the threat of exposure to control her. He wasn't just letting her drown, he was holding her head under the water. He was the low, threatening voice because he had his own stake in keeping the truth buried, his own fear of losing everything. The realization left me feeling utterly hollowed out, betrayed on every level. My husband, my daughter, my son-in-law. A family built on layers of secrets and lies, stretching back decades, now unraveling before my horrified eyes. I was alone in this. Alone against a network of deception that had festered for years. But my isolation only strengthened my resolve. If no one else would fight for Sarah, I would. My protective fury, once a spark, now raged into a roaring inferno. I carefully replaced the notebook, the email, and the briefcase, leaving no trace. As I slipped out of Daniel's SUV, closing the door softly behind me, the once familiar suburban street felt like a hostile, alien landscape. The quiet house next door, once a symbol of family harmony, now loomed like a tomb, guarding secrets that threatened to devour us all. My world had shattered, and I was left to pick up the pieces, not of a quiet, elderly life, but of a broken, deceitful dynasty. The cold, hard facts gleaned from Daniel's briefcase resonated with a bitter truth. He wasn't just complicit. He was actively involved in managing Sarah's torment. The knowledge settled deep in my bones, a chilling echo of the betrayal I now felt for James. My husband, my daughter, my son-in-law, the entire scaffolding of my family life felt rotten to the core. A profound sense of loneliness settled upon me. I was the last one standing, seemingly the only one driven by a desire for actual truth, rather than the desperate preservation of a fragile facade. My mind, however, refused to surrender to despair. Instead, it clung to a nagging detail from Daniel's email: "Tell Sarah she needs to find the rest, or the whole town hears about James Vance and the Donovan collapse." And about what she helped him bury. What she helped him bury. The words haunted me. Michael believed Sarah was complicit, Daniel certainly did, and the old documents from James hinted at more than just a cover-up. But what? And what rest did she need to find? I returned to James's study, the room now a source of both profound grief and relentless questions. The old wooden box, which had yielded his confession to Arthur, still lay on the desk. I hadn't dared to look further, the weight of his initial secret too much to bear. But now, driven by a desperate hope that there was another side to Sarah's story, a way to absolve her, I forced myself to delve deeper. I rummaged through the remaining contents of the box. There were old photographs, faded letters from his parents, even a lock of my own hair from our wedding day, relics of a life that now felt like a beautiful, terrible lie. My fingers brushed against a thicker, almost brittle envelope, tucked at the very bottom, hidden beneath a velvet pouch of old cufflinks. It was addressed simply to "My dearest Eleanor" in James's distinctive hand. A lump formed in my throat. This wasn't a business letter. This was personal. My heart thudded, a frantic drum against my ribs. Had he left me a final, loving message? A comfort from beyond the grave? The thought offered a fleeting, cruel spark of hope. I opened it, the brittle paper crackling in my silent study. It was dated 5 years before his death, long after the financial scandal had supposedly died down. It wasn't a love letter in the traditional sense, but a final, agonizing confession, written in his beautiful, flowing script, now marred by what looked like dried tear stains. "My dearest Eleanor," it began, "if you are reading this, I am gone. And I pray you find it only when you are strong enough, or when it is absolutely necessary. I have carried a terrible burden, one that has eaten away at my soul, and for which I deserve no peace." The letter to Arthur was a fragment, a glimpse of my guilt. But the truth is more complex and more damning. My vision blurred, but I forced myself to continue reading, each word a hammer blow to my heart. The Donovan collapse, as they called it, was not just an oversight. It was a deliberate scheme orchestrated by several senior figures at the bank. I was young, ambitious, and foolish. I saw the signs, yes, but I was also offered a choice. Either go along, keep quiet, and receive a substantial bonus and a fast-tracked promotion, or be branded a whistleblower, lose my job, and face financial ruin myself. I chose the coward's path. I signed off on documents I knew were misleading. I helped obscure the paper trail. I was a direct participant in the fraud. A guttural cry escaped my lips, a sound of raw pain I didn't recognize as my own. My James. My honorable, decent James. He wasn't just complicit. He was an active player in a scheme that had destroyed lives. The letter continued, each line deepening the chasm of my disillusionment. But the greatest burden, Eleanor, is Sarah. Our beautiful, brilliant Sarah. She discovered my secret, quite by accident, when she was a young woman in college. Not the full extent, not then. Just enough to realize that I was involved in something illicit, something that had deeply wronged the Donovan family, whose son, Michael, was a classmate of hers and was constantly seeking answers about his family's ruin. My breath hitched. Sarah. She knew. All these years. She didn't expose me, James wrote. She tried to protect me. She helped me create a counter-narrative, a series of fabricated alibis and altered documents, to ensure that the lingering suspicions against me, especially from Michael, would remain just that, suspicions. She believed she was protecting her family, protecting my reputation, protecting you. She kept my secret, and in doing so, tied herself to my sin. I swore to her I would make amends, that I would find a way to secretly compensate the Donovan family, but I never got the chance. And now she is living with the consequences of my cowardice, carrying a burden that is not truly hers. The letter ended with a plea: "Forgive me, Eleanor. Forgive Sarah. Protect her. The truth is bitter, but it is better than the lie we lived. My only hope is that this confession can somehow, eventually, set her free." The letter slid from my numb fingers, fluttering onto the scattered clippings and documents. My world, already fractured, now lay in irreparable shards at my feet. James hadn't just been complicit. He had been an active participant, a fraudster. And Sarah, my daughter, had known. She hadn't been an unwitting victim in the college scandal. She had actively helped her father cover up his past, believing she was protecting her family. She wasn't a criminal, but a daughter desperate to shield a beloved parent, unknowingly binding herself to his toxic legacy. The pain of James's betrayal was immense, a searing wound that reopened old scars and created new ones. All the years of our marriage, the comfortable life, the love, had it all been built on such a terrible, agonizing lie? My grief for him shifted, transforming into a profound sorrow for the man he truly was and for the choices he had made. But amidst the rubble of my shattered illusions, a new understanding of Sarah emerged. She wasn't cold or calculating or inherently deceitful. She was trapped. Trapped by her father's past, by Michael's vengeful blackmail, and by her own desperate, misguided loyalty. Her lies to me, her frantic efforts to push me away, weren't about guilt for a crime she committed, but about a crushing weight of inherited sin, a desire to protect the very family she felt she was destroying. My anger at her melted away, replaced by a fierce, protective love, stronger than ever before. She was not the perpetrator. She was a victim, caught in a generational crossfire, paying a devastating price for her father's transgressions. My focus, once scattered, now sharpened with terrifying clarity. It wasn't just about uncovering the truth. It was about redemption. About making amends for James's sins. About setting Sarah free. And I, Eleanor Vance, the unsuspecting widow, was now ready to sacrifice everything to achieve it. The turning point had come. My fight was no longer just a mother's instinct. It was a crusade for justice, for truth, and for the redemption of my broken family. The weight of James's final letter settled on me, heavy and cold, yet strangely liberating. The truth, however brutal, had clarified everything. Sarah wasn't a monster. She was a casualty, a daughter bound by a desperate, misguided loyalty to a father who had shattered her world long before his death. My anger at her dissolved, replaced by a fierce, protective love that burned brighter than ever. My focus, once diffused by confusion and suspicion, now sharpened into a singular, unwavering resolve. I had to free her. And the only way to do that was to confront Michael Donovan and expose the full, unvarnished truth. Michael's ultimatum, relayed through Daniel's cryptic email, still echoed in my mind: "Tell Sarah she needs to find the rest. Or the whole town hears about James Vance and the Donovan collapse. And about what she helped him bury." He believed Sarah possessed some hidden asset, some last vestige of James's ill-gotten gains. He was wrong. The rest wasn't money, it was the truth, the full confession from James that now lay in my hands. My plan began to form, taking shape with a chilling precision I never knew I possessed. I needed to lure Michael out, to bring him into the light, away from the shadows where he operated. I couldn't involve the police yet, not without risking Sarah's reputation, not without potentially implicating her for her desperate cover-up of James's past. I needed to control the narrative, to ensure that when the truth finally emerged, it would be a weapon to save Sarah, not condemn her. I thought about the flash drive, still hidden in my purse, containing the audio and video evidence of Michael's blackmail. And then, there was James's letter, the ultimate proof of his guilt and Sarah's tragic, innocent complicity. These were my weapons. The first step was to establish contact. I couldn't call him directly. He wouldn't trust me. I needed an intermediary, someone seemingly innocuous, someone who could carry a message without knowing its true weight. My mind immediately went to the anonymous email address Daniel had received. It was a long shot, but it was my only shot. It took me hours, hunched over my old desktop computer, slowly typing with my arthritic fingers. I created a new, anonymous email account, something simple and untraceable. I composed the message carefully, each word chosen for maximum impact, designed to pique Michael's greed and curiosity without revealing too much. Subject: regarding the Vance family legacy, a new development. Body: to the party interested in the affairs of the late James Vance and the Donovan family. I have come into possession of documents regarding the Donovan collapse and certain financial arrangements that followed. These documents confirm James Vance's deeper involvement than previously understood and may shed new light on the hidden assets you seek. I believe this information could be highly beneficial to your interests, but it carries significant risk if mishandled. I propose a meeting to discuss these matters in person. I am willing to share what I know under specific conditions. You can reach me at this anonymous address. Be aware, I am not Sarah Vance. I am a third party who seeks only a just resolution for all involved. My interest is in truth, not personal gain, but I understand yours is different. Consider carefully. The consequences of inaction or misguided action could be severe for all parties. I hit send, a tremor running through me. It was a bluff, a calculated risk. I was dangling bait, hoping to catch a predator. The waiting was excruciating. Every ping of my computer, every notification from my email, sent my heart leaping. Hours passed, stretching into the next day. I barely ate, barely slept, my eyes glued to the screen. Then, just before midnight, a reply. Subject: regarding the Vance family legacy, a new development. Body: you claim to have information? About James Vance? And the hidden assets? Who are you? And what makes you think I'd trust some anonymous tip? This sounds like a trap. Prove you have something. Give me a detail only someone with insider knowledge would know. And then, maybe we talk. But don't waste my time. My patience is wearing thin, and I have other ways to get what I want. His response was aggressive, wary, but it was a response. He was hooked. I composed my next message with even greater care, drawing on details from James's confession and the old newspaper clippings. I gave him a specific date, a precise transaction, a unique code from one of the bank documents James had referenced in his letter to Arthur, a detail that only someone directly involved, or with access to James's most private papers, would know. I also added a subtle jab, a hint that I knew about his current actions. The sum of $27,000 transferred from the dormant account of the Peterson Trust to a numbered offshore account on October 14, 1983. A specific service fee for a favored client. Does that ring a bell? And yes, I am aware of your recent activities. I seek not to expose you, but to offer a different path, one that could secure your desired outcome without further destruction. My offer for a meeting stands. Come alone. I will pick the location. And I assure you it will be a public place, for my safety, not yours. If you bring anyone else, or if I sense any threat, our conversation ends. Consider this your final chance for a less chaotic resolution. I hit send again, my heart pounding a furious rhythm. I was stepping into the lion's den, but I wasn't going in defenseless. My mind, fueled by the cold fire of protective love, was sharper than it had ever been. The trap was set. Now, I just had to wait for the lion to walk in. The air thickened with anticipation, a charged electricity that promised an imminent storm. My fight for Sarah, for the truth, was about to begin. The reply from Michael Donovan came swiftly, his desperation overriding his caution. He agreed to the meeting, stipulating his own conditions: no police, no tricks, and he would choose the time if I chose the place. I picked the town's quietest park, a small patch of green bordered by ancient oak trees, popular with dog walkers during the day but almost deserted after dusk. It felt like neutral territory, the dim glow of the park lamps offering just enough visibility without being glaring. My heart pounded a frantic drum against my ribs as I confirmed the arrangements, setting the stage for what I knew would be the most perilous confrontation of my life. I arrived early, just as the last hints of twilight faded, wrapping my worn cardigan tighter against the evening chill, though it was fear, not cold, that truly made me shiver. I sat on a weathered wooden bench, facing the entrance, a large, nondescript tote bag clutched in my lap. Inside, carefully concealed, were the flash drive and James's letter. My mind, sharp as a honed blade, rehearsed my arguments, my pleas, my desperate gamble for Sarah's freedom. A black SUV, too new, too sleek for this quiet park, rolled to a stop at the curb. Michael Donovan emerged, his silhouette stark against the fading light. He was taller than I remembered from the old photograph, his frame lean and tense. His dark hair was still unruly, but his face was harder, etched with years of resentment and suspicion. His eyes, when they met mine across the expanse of grass, burned with an almost feral intensity. He was no longer the desperate young man in the recording. He was a man consumed by a decades-old thirst for justice, or perhaps for revenge. He walked towards me, his gait purposeful, his hands shoved into the pockets of his dark jacket. He stopped a few feet away, his gaze sweeping the empty park, clearly looking for any sign of a trap. "So, the mysterious third party," he sneered, his voice a low growl, more menacing in person than on the recordings. "Who are you? And what makes you think you can play games with me?" "My name is Eleanor Vance," I stated, my voice surprisingly steady, though my heart was hammering. "I am James Vance's widow, and Sarah Vance's mother." His eyes widened fractionally, a flicker of surprise breaking through his hardened facade. Then a dark, dangerous smile spread across his lips. Well, the matriarch herself. A desperate mother. I should have known. "So, you finally decided to crawl out of your gilded cage and face the music, did you? What, did Sarah finally tell you the truth, or did you just stumble upon her little secret?" He took a step closer, his presence radiating menace. "And what makes you think I'll listen to anything you have to say? Your husband ruined my family, and your daughter helped him cover it up. I want what's owed to me." "I know the full truth, Michael," I countered, my voice gaining strength. "I know about my husband's complicity in the collapse of the investment scheme. I know he chose ambition over integrity. And I know your family suffered terribly because of it. There is nothing you can tell me about James's guilt that I haven't already faced. But Sarah is not what you think. She was a young woman, trying to protect her father, believing she was saving our family from ruin. She did not orchestrate the fraud. She merely helped him hide it. And she has been paying for his sins and for yours for years." I reached into my bag, pulling out James's letter, its brittle pages illuminated by the dim park light. This is James's confession. The full confession. Not just to a friend, but to me. It details his involvement, his guilt, his remorse. It also explains Sarah's unwitting role, how she helped him bury his secret, not a secret of her own making. This is what you're truly seeking, isn't it? Not just money, but justice. Truth. Michael's eyes narrowed, fixed on the letter. His certainty seemed to waver, just for a second. A letter? What good is a letter? It doesn't bring back what my family lost. It doesn't prove anything about Sarah's complicity in the current situation, or what she and her husband have been hiding in that garage. "I have proof of that too," I said, pulling out the flash drive. "Recordings. Videos. Proof of your blackmail, your threats, and Sarah's desperate fear. Proof that she's been trying to protect herself and me from you. And proof that someone else is involved, someone who benefits from keeping all of us silent." Just as the words left my mouth, a familiar black SUV screeched to a halt at the curb. My blood ran cold. "Daniel." He burst from the car, his face a mask of furious alarm. His eyes darted from me to Michael, then back again. "Eleanor, what the hell are you doing? I told you to stay out of it." His voice, sharp and angry, confirmed my worst suspicions. This was the low, threatening rumble I'd heard, amplified by panic. Michael's face twisted into a triumphant sneer. Well, look who decided to join the party. Daniel. Always the loyal husband, protecting his little secret. He gestured towards me. "She's got something, Daniel. Something about James. Something about you." Daniel's eyes flickered with a raw, desperate fear. "Donovan, don't be a fool. You don't know what you're doing. Let's just talk about this like rational adults. No one needs to get hurt." He took a step towards Michael, his hand moving towards his jacket pocket. A sudden, sharp movement. Not from Daniel, but from another figure, running across the grass from the direction of the park's far entrance. No. Stop. It was Sarah. Her hair disheveled, her face pale and streaked with tears. She ran towards us, her eyes wide with terror, not at Michael, but at her husband. She stopped abruptly, gasping for breath, her gaze falling on the letter in my hand, then on the flash drive. "Mom, you found it," she whispered, her voice broken, raw with resignation. She looked at Michael, then at Daniel, the weight of years of lies crushing her. "Michael, Daniel, listen to me. Please. This has to end." Michael laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "End? It only ends when I get what I'm owed, Sarah. And now your mother's decided to play detective, and your husband's trying to play hero. What a family reunion. You want the truth, Michael?" Sarah cried out, her voice cracking, but with a new, fierce desperation. "You want to know what happened? My father, he was a cheat. He participated in that fraud. I helped him hide it, yes, out of fear, out of a misguided love. But I never touched his dirty money. There is no hidden fortune. And you buried a man in our backyard, Michael. That's what's really been happening. That's what Daniel and I have been trying to fix, to hide, because you threatened to expose everything, to ruin my children's lives." The words hung in the crisp evening air, stark and horrifying. Michael's face, for the first time, showed genuine shock, his sneer dissolving into a mask of disbelief. Daniel, equally stunned by Sarah's outburst, froze, his hand still hovering over his pocket. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by Sarah's ragged sobs. The full, terrifying truth, amplified by her raw confession, crashed down on us all. Michael's blackmail, rooted in James's past, had escalated into something far more sinister, forcing Sarah and Daniel into an unimaginable crime to protect their family. My heart ached for Sarah, for the terrible choices she'd been forced to make, for the impossible burden she'd carried alone. "He was trying to expose James, Mom," Sarah sobbed, turning to me, her eyes pleading for understanding. "He kept threatening to go public. He believed there was money. When he came to the house, he found some old ledgers. There was a struggle. He fell. It was an accident. Daniel and I, we panicked. We just wanted to make it go away. To protect the children. To protect you." The scene was a tableau of raw human wreckage under the dim park lights. Michael, his face a mixture of rage and dawning horror at Sarah's accusation of murder. Daniel, his calculated facade finally shattered, his eyes darting wildly. And Sarah, my beautiful, broken daughter, finally unburdening herself of the lie that had been suffocating her. The storm had broken, and its destructive force threatened to engulf us all. The accusation hung in the crisp night air, thick with the scent of pine needles and damp earth. "You buried a man in our backyard, Michael." Sarah's words, a desperate, raw confession, shattered the fragile tension, replacing it with a horrifying new reality. Michael Donovan, who had arrived seeking justice for his family's past, now stood accused of murder. His face, a moment ago consumed by rage, twisted into a mask of disbelief and dawning terror. Daniel, equally stunned by Sarah's unvarnished admission, finally dropped his hand from his pocket, his face pale and slack. The game was no longer about old debts, it was about life and death. "It was an accident," Sarah repeated, her voice hoarse, her eyes wide and pleading, directed at me. "He was trying to expose James, Mom. He found the old ledgers Daniel had been holding onto. He attacked Daniel. There was a struggle. He fell. It was so fast." She choked on a sob, her shoulders shaking. "Daniel and I, we just panicked. We didn't know what else to do. We just wanted it to go away. To protect the children. To protect you." My heart ached for her, a profound, gut-wrenching pain. My daughter, pushed to unimaginable extremes by a chain of events set in motion decades ago. But amidst the chaos of her confession, a chilling clarity settled over me. Michael was accused of murder. Daniel was complicit in the cover-up. And Sarah, my brave, broken Sarah, was caught in the middle. This wasn't just about revealing the truth, it was about ensuring justice and about protecting Sarah from the full, devastating consequences of their desperate actions. "Michael," I said, my voice cutting through the stunned silence, surprisingly firm. I held up James's letter and the flash drive, their symbolic weight heavier than any physical weapon. This letter proves my husband's guilt in the financial fraud. It proves his manipulation of Sarah. And this, I gestured to the flash drive, contains recordings of your blackmail, your threats, and Sarah's desperate pleas. It also contains evidence of Daniel's involvement in managing your demands, and even of his own threats to Sarah. I turned my gaze to Daniel, whose face was now a sickly shade of gray. Daniel, I continued, your email to Michael, where you instruct Sarah to find the rest or risk exposure, coupled with Sarah's confession, implicates you not just in a cover-up, but in coercing her into further criminal acts. And your presence here tonight, your attempt to intervene, only adds to that. My words, delivered with the calm authority of a seasoned teacher, seemed to momentarily stun them all. Michael's eyes, however, still held a dangerous glint. What good is any of that, old woman? He snarled, taking a threatening step towards me. It doesn't change what happened to him. He gestured vaguely at the ground, implying the buried body. And it doesn't get me what I'm owed. What you're owed is justice, Michael, I retorted, meeting his gaze unflinchingly. And true justice is not achieved through blackmail or by causing more death and destruction. It's achieved through truth, presented to the proper authorities. This letter, I held it up again, finally provides the proof of James Vance's crimes. It offers a path to genuine legal restitution for your family, not through your threats, but through the law. And Sarah's testimony, combined with the evidence on this drive, can expose the full extent of the manipulation she's endured, both from you and from Daniel. I took a deep breath. You have a choice, Michael. You can continue down this path of violence and destruction and face charges for extortion and potentially for the death of whoever is buried in that backyard. Or you can come forward with me, present your evidence, present James's confession, and seek true justice. You can tell your story to the police, with my help, and ensure that what happened to your family is finally acknowledged and atoned for. But, I added, my voice hardening, if you try to silence me or harm any of us, the evidence I hold will still find its way to the authorities. I have ensured that. It was a bluff, but a convincing one. Mary, my dear Mary, knew where to find the flash drive if anything happened to me. Michael hesitated, his eyes darting between my resolute face, the damning letter, and the distraught Sarah. The raw truth of James's confession, the undeniable evidence of his blackmail, and the sudden, terrifying accusation of a death in Sarah's backyard had thrown his vengeful plans into disarray. He was no longer in control. Just then, the distant wail of sirens pierced the night. My heart leaped. I hadn't called them directly. But Mary, dear, clever Mary. After our last conversation, she had promised to keep an eye on things, to call for help if I didn't check in. She must have deduced something was terribly wrong when I didn't answer her last call. The flashing blue and red lights painted the trees in a surreal glow as a patrol car pulled into the park. 2 officers emerged, their hands on their holsters, their gazes sweeping over the tense tableau. What's going on here? One officer demanded, his voice authoritative. Sarah, seeing the police, let out a choked cry, collapsing onto the grass, the weight of her confession finally breaking her. I stepped forward, holding up James's letter and the flash drive. My voice, though trembling, was clear and strong. Officers, my name is Eleanor Vance. I have crucial information regarding a missing persons case, a long unresolved financial fraud, and a death that occurred at my daughter's home. And these 2 men are deeply involved. I gestured first to Michael, then to Daniel, whose face was now utterly devoid of color, his earlier bravado completely shattered. Daniel, seeing the flashing lights, seeing Sarah's distraught collapse, finally cracked. It was an accident, he blurted out, his voice high-pitched and frantic. He attacked me. I swear. And Sarah. Sarah just helped me. She was trying to protect our family. Michael, realizing he was cornered, his blackmail now exposed and a potential murder accusation hanging over him, looked from Daniel's desperate outburst to the approaching officers, then to the letter in my hand. His face contorted in a silent scream of defeated rage. He deserved it, he hissed, his eyes fixed on Daniel, his father. They all deserved it. The officers moved quickly, securing Daniel and Michael, reading them their rights. One knelt beside Sarah, trying to calm her, while another approached me, carefully taking the letter and the flash drive. As they led Daniel away in handcuffs, his eyes met mine, a desperate, accusing glance that spoke of betrayal and ruin. Michael, still simmering with venom, was also escorted to the patrol car, his plans for vengeance now ironically leading to his own downfall. I watched them go, a profound weariness settling over me. The storm had broken, and the truth, in all its devastating ugliness, was finally exposed. My family's secrets, buried for decades, were now laid bare. And in that moment, as I stood there, a 72-year-old woman in a quiet park, surrounded by police and the echoes of shattered lives, I felt not triumph, but a quiet, solemn sense of duty fulfilled. The fight for truth had begun, and its consequences, though painful, promised a different kind of freedom. The aftermath was a blur of flashing lights, hushed conversations with somber-faced detectives, and the chilling finality of police tape cordoning off Sarah's house, a grim yellow ribbon across our familiar world. Mary, bless her tenacious spirit, arrived soon after, her presence a quiet comfort amidst the official chaos. She held my hand, her grip firm, a silent testament to our shared ordeal. Sarah, utterly broken, was taken to the station for questioning. Her raw confession in the park, though devastating, had been crucial. It established her narrative, a victim of circumstance, manipulated by a blackmailer and coerced by her husband into a panicked, desperate act. The body in the backyard was indeed Michael Donovan's, a discovery that sent a fresh wave of horror through the quiet suburban neighborhood. The initial police theory of his disappearance swiftly shifted to one of a struggle, a fall, and a tragic, panicked cover-up. Daniel, confronted with Sarah's testimony and the damning evidence, quickly crumbled, admitting his role in burying Michael and coercing Sarah into silence. The ensuing legal proceedings were long and arduous. My days became a procession of lawyers' offices, courtrooms, and hushed, tearful conversations with Sarah. James's confession letter, a brutal testament to his complicity in the decades-old financial fraud, proved to be the linchpin. It established Michael Donovan's motive for blackmail, painting him not just as a criminal, but as a deeply wronged individual seeking desperate, misguided vengeance. This, coupled with the flash drive's contents, the recordings of Michael's threats and Daniel's manipulation, built a powerful case for Sarah as a victim, caught in a suffocating web of generational deceit and present-day coercion. In the end, Sarah received a suspended sentence for her role in the cover-up, a testament to the judge's understanding of the extraordinary circumstances and the weight of her father's legacy. She was mandated to undergo extensive counseling, a path she embraced with a quiet, determined resolve. Daniel, however, faced a harsher reality. His active participation in the concealment of Michael's death, coupled with the evidence of his manipulation of Sarah, led to a significant prison sentence. He had betrayed us all, not out of fear, but out of a cynical desire to protect his reputation and his financial standing. The reputation of the Vance family, once a quiet emblem of suburban respectability, was irrevocably tarnished. The headlines were sensational, detailing the interwoven threads of old fraud, modern blackmail, and a tragic death. Neighbors whispered, friends offered awkward condolences, and the quiet comfort of our community was replaced by a constant hum of speculation and judgment. But amidst the rubble of our public image, something profoundly valuable emerged: truth. The full, unvarnished truth, laid bare for all to see. It was painful, yes, a searing wound that would take years to heal. But it was also liberating. My relationship with Sarah, though born out of trauma, was transformed. The layers of polite pretense, of unspoken expectations, were stripped away, leaving only raw honesty. We spoke for hours, for days, revisiting the past, dissecting James's choices, acknowledging Sarah's impossible burden. There were tears, of course, but also an understanding, a profound connection that had been absent for far too long. She began to heal, slowly, painfully, finding a fragile new strength in the wreckage of her old life. She moved out of the house where the tragedy occurred, seeking a fresh start for herself and her children, who were now struggling to comprehend the complexity of their family's history. As for me, Eleanor Vance, my quiet life was irrevocably altered. The roses in my garden still bloomed, their beauty a defiant splash of color against the changed landscape of my soul. But I no longer walked the familiar streets with a sense of complacent peace. My eyes, once softly observant, were now sharply aware, having seen the darkness that can lurk beneath even the most pristine surfaces. I often sat in James's study, the wooden box with his confession now openly displayed on his desk, a constant, tangible reminder of the complexities of human nature, of love, ambition, and the devastating power of secrets. I began to write. Not formal memoirs, not a tell-all expose, but a personal narrative, a reflection on the choices we make, the burdens we carry, and the unexpected strength we find when forced to confront the truth. My words flowed onto the page, an honest accounting of the journey from blissful ignorance to painful enlightenment. I realized that life was not a neat, orderly narrative, but a sprawling, messy epic, filled with unexpected twists and moral ambiguities. Our family, once a beacon of perceived perfection, was now a testament to human fallibility, but also to resilience, to the enduring power of love to mend even the most fractured bonds. I had found a new purpose, a new voice, not as a teacher of literature, but as a chronicler of life's most profound and difficult lessons. My world was no longer quiet, but it was real. And in that raw, exposed reality, I found a wisdom, a quiet strength, and a profound, if melancholic, sense of peace. My story was not one of a happy ending, but of a wise acceptance of a new, complex reality and the forging of a new identity, tempered by fire.